Number one cause of diabetes is refined sugar. Did you know that there was no diabetes on the planet till sugar was well established? But something else has come along. And you will find that most of these foods are made out of it.
While most of us view sugar as a harmless indulgence, its far-reaching effects on the body are devastating. In fact, sugar is the favorite fuel for yeast and fungus, allowing them to multiply rapidly in your body.
What is a virus? There are a few theories on a virus, but the fact is a virus can't survive by itself. It needs a host. And there is another microorganism that has a similar function, and that is yeast and fungus. They need a host. And so there are some trains of thought that are saying a virus, a yeast and a fungus are maybe the same thing because they are so similar. They need a host. And they are also part of the microorganisms that act like the scavengers. They're opportunist organisms. They will only survive where they get a lot of food. So what is the yeast and funguses, the virus's favourite food? Sugar and other yeasts. So to make sure that we are living in a body where these cannot really survive long, or in a body where they are in their right proportion, it's important to give the body the right conditions for healing. We live in a self-healing, self-cleansing organism. What are some of the symptoms that the yeast or fungus might be present in your body? Probably the most common symptoms are jock itch, athlete's foot, which is also called tinea, anal itch. Where does yeast, fungus, mold like to live in your house? In the dark, moist areas. Same with the body, between the toes, under the arm, in the groin, in those areas. Also even up in the sinus areas. And so to make sure that your body is able to deal with these and bring a proper balance back in the body, it is important to drink adequate water. It is important not to be taking the refined sugar, and if you do take sugar, it should be in the form of your natural sugars like honey, maple syrup, fruits, but in low amounts.
From feeding fungal infections to increasing your risk of autoimmune diseases, the hidden dangers of sugar are more destructive than you might think. Barbara O'Neill explains that sugar is the perfect food for harmful microorganisms like Candida albicans, a yeast that naturally resides in the gut.
A lot of people are suffering from yeast overgrowth or candidiasis, and what advice can you give them?
I've actually written a book on the subject, and in that book I go through the history of yeast, fungus. I look at how it can get into the body, and there are some specific programs. But in a nutshell, it loves sugars, it loves yeasts. So you got to get the fruit intake really, really low, down to low glycemic fruits, lots of vegetables, and no yeasts.
Yes.
And you've really got to check the house that there's no mold in the house.
So can you tell us your book?
My book is called Self-Heal by Design, and it's basically the role of microorganisms, or the true role of microorganisms in disease. Unfortunately, today they're blamed as the problem, but what I look at is why they are around. And as I explain it, you see that microorganisms play a very important role in the life cycle on planet Earth, in the life cycle in the human body. And so when they're out of control, we need to look at why they're out of control and how we can bring the balance back.
Under normal conditions, the body's beneficial bacteria keep this yeast in check. But when antibiotics or poor diet habits disrupt the balance, yeast can overgrow. Sugar becomes their primary fuel source, enabling them to multiply rapidly. As they grow, they release toxic byproducts that damage the intestinal lining, allowing partially digested food and harmful yeast to enter the bloodstream.
So let's have a look at it on the glycemic index. Now, the glycemic index is a very important index for diabetics because the glycemic index is an index or a reading on how quickly the glucose in that food is released into the blood. So your baseline is 55. So all your berries sit at about 26. Grapefruit, it sits at 25. So for the diabetic, these are good fruits because they're low GI. They're a lovely, slower delivery of fuel. Whereas bananas, they sit up here somewhere. So where does sugar sit? Sugar sits at 59. Where does white bread, white pasta, white cereal, it sits at 69 because of the amylopectin starch in it. What about whole wheat? Whole wheat bread, whole wheat cereal, it sits at 72. How could that be? Well, because the whole wheat isn't refined, it's got more amylopectin A in it. And it's the amylopectin A that gets the blood sugar level up. Now, absolutely, whole wheat bread is superior to white because it's got fibre, it's got your B vitamins. But in regard to the diabetic, who's watching their blood glucose levels, they need to eliminate wheat. Totally.
This is how sugar fuels the development of many autoimmune diseases. Barbara O'Neill highlights how antibiotics, often prescribed to treat infections, can worsen the problem. When antibiotics kill off beneficial gut bacteria, they unintentionally clear the way for yeast and fungus to thrive. Sugar consumption only accelerates this process, feeding these microorganisms and creating a vicious cycle. The implications are even more alarming when you consider the role sugar plays in conditions like autoimmune diseases, heart disease, and even cancer.
Mycology is the study of fungus. And he also found that with every case of cancer, when he tested them for fungus, they always tested positive to fungus in the body. But remember, it's just an opportunist organism. It's there for a reason. There are many, many causes of cancer. And I think most people realise that the number one cause of lung cancer is smoking. Over many, many years, the cigarette smoke has damaged the lungs. The opportunist organisms come along and start to clean up the damage. And in every case, it can be different. That's why no two cases are the same. I have many books in my library at home, and I have quite a few books on scientists, professors, doctors, nutritionists, naturopaths who are having success with conquering cancer. So I'm always intrigued, why? What do they do? And there are many different modalities people use, but I looked for 3 common denominators. So I'd like to show you those 3 common denominators. So we're going to look at it like this. Cancer loves. In other words, if cancer is given these conditions, it thrives. It loves glucose. In fact, cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. Cancer also loves an environment where there's no oxygen. Cancer thrives in an acid environment. On the other hand, let's make a list of what cancer hates. And if cancer hates this is what we want to give to the body. Cancer hates no glucose. And cancer hates oxygen. The fact is, cancer cannot live in the presence of oxygen. And cancer hates an alkaline environment. So what we aim for at our retreat is creating an environment that is very low glucose, is optimum amounts of oxygen, and creating an alkaline environment at the cellular level. And so what we aim to do when we're giving the body a condition where cancer cannot survive, we look at starving the cancer. And when you have a look at many cancers have a fungal component, what does fungus love? Glucose. So the glucose goes into the cell, and when it gets into the cell, it goes through a 20-step pathway. These are 20 little chemical reactions, and that gives us 2 units of energy. Now, this 20-step pathway is a pathway that does not use oxygen. It creates energy by the process of fermentation. The end result of this 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the 8-step pathway. This 8-step pathway is called the powerhouse of the cell, because this 8-step pathway delivers 36 units of energy. So how come a 20-step pathway only gives 2 units of energy? How come an 8-step pathway gives 36 units of energy? The difference is oxygen. Now this pathway here, this 20-step pathway, is very fast. It's a very fast pathway to the point that it's consuming 15 times the glucose. This pathway is a slow pathway. So you can see cancer loves no oxygen. Cancer loves 15 times the glucose. This is where cancer loves to thrive.
According to Barbara O'Neill, the toxic waste produced by yeast overgrowth can trigger chronic inflammation, a key driver of many serious health conditions. Sugar provides the perfect acidic environment for these microorganisms to thrive, making it harder for your body to heal itself. Barbara O'Neill explains that unhealthy lifestyle habits, including high sugar consumption, create the perfect environment for yeast and fungal overgrowth.
If someone has a yeast presence in their body and they eat fruit, the sugar in the fruit will feed the yeast. And as the yeast feeds on the sugar in the fruit, it gives off acetic acid. It gives off lactic acid. It gives off uric acid. It gives off alcohol. Can you see what yeast does? It feathers its nest. It maintains the 5.5 pH at the cellular level that it thrives in. One lady said, Barbara, but God made fruit. Yes, he did make fruit. And fruit is good. Yes, it is very good. But if you have a yeast presence in your body and you eat the fruit, you will feed the yeast. And it's not forever. You adjust according to what's happening in the body. How do you know you've got a yeast presence in the body? Your tongue. Your tongue should be pink from the tip to the back. It is at this point that everyone usually pokes their tongue out at each other. You can wait till you get back to your bathroom and look in the mirror. The tongue should be pink.
Many people don't realize that sugar is hiding in so many foods they consume daily. Bread, pasta, salad dressings, and even so-called health foods, like flavored yogurts. This constant sugar intake is fueling the very microorganisms that are damaging their health.
Hippocrates, the father of medicine, 400 years BC, no mention of diabetes in his writings. So diabetes is a fairly modern disease. Diabetes is a lifestyle disease. Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. Why isn't the pancreas working? That's what we should be asking. As Proverbs 26 verse 2 states, the curse causeless shall not come. There is a reason. There is a reason why pancreases are not working. Now the pancreas's, one of its main roles is to release 2 hormones. One is insulin, that gets the blood sugar down. The other hormone is glucagon, and that gets the blood sugar level up. But what's happening today is people predominantly are eating a high carbohydrate diet. And this high carbohydrate diet releases a lot of glucose. And that glucose, when it gets into the blood, especially the refined sugar, and by the way, the refined grains, it's almost as high as sugar. But there is one grain that gets the blood sugar levels higher than refined sugar. Is that a surprise? And the grain that does that is what? Bread and cereal and pasta and cakes, etc., and pizza are all made out of predominantly one grain. What's that one grain? It's wheat. Now in the 1950s, wheat went through intensive crossbreeding. And the reason they put it through intensive crossbreeding is they wanted to create a plant with a high yield of grain, so that would help with the starvation crisis in Africa, in Mexico, in India. The wheat started to go worldwide. So by the 1990s,
Every bread, cereal, pasta, cake, etc., pizza, all made out of this hybridised wheat. It was rushed through with no safety studies. They didn't think they had to do safety studies on wheat. It was rushed through with no safety studies. It sounds like the COVID vaccine, doesn't it? Rushed through with no safety studies. And who's it experimented on? And they're starting to realise this only now. What it produced was a type of starch structure that gets the blood sugar level up higher than even sugar. So the starch structure that was created is called amylopectin A.
So, what can you do to break this harmful cycle? Barbara O'Neill suggests eliminating all forms of processed sugar from your diet. By cutting off the sugar supply, you deprive the yeast and fungus of their primary food source. Instead, she recommends incorporating more alkaline-forming foods, such as vegetables and whole grains, which help balance the body's pH levels and starve harmful microorganisms.
We had a man do our program and he was about 65 and he never ate salad. He said, rabbit food. After hearing this lecture, the next meal, he had a big green salad. Knowledge is easy to him that understands. Now this explains why things like green barley, green smoothies, wheatgrass, spirulina, they're very popular today, aren't they? They're very alkalizing. In fact, chlorophyll is one of the best tissue and blood cleansers there are. So anyone who's sick, have a dose of that chlorophyll or green barley 3 times a day. It'll help to mop up the poisons as they come out. Vegetables. Vegetables are alkaline forming. But there is an exception in the vegetable kingdom, so I'm going to put a question mark here, because for some people these vegetables have an acid effect and for some people they have an alkaline effect. It's the nightshade group of vegetables. It's tomato, capsicum, I'm in America, bell pepper. So I've got to rewire the brain. Bell pepper and eggplant. Would you call it aubergine? Would you call it eggplant? Eggplant's fine. And the fourth one is the white man's potato, my husband's favourite. This isn't the sweet potato, this is the Irish potato. The sweet potato is not a potato, it is a yam. They're the nightshade group of vegetables, and for some people they have an acid effect and for some people they have an alkaline effect. How do you know what you are? Who will tell you? Your body will tell you. Now, my mother died a cripple in a wheelchair at the age of 51 with rheumatoid arthritis. I have strong inherited genes there. And my body says to me, a little tomato. Organic sits much better. The yellow tomatoes sit better. Cooked tomato seems okay. Bell pepper, my body says, don't even think about putting it near your mouth. If I eat it, it repeats on me all afternoon. My energy goes. What's my body saying to me? Please don't eat that. And I say, okay. That's why you should be your own doctor, because no one knows how you feel. No one knows what you've been through. No one knows how different things respond or react on you. My role is that of a teacher, and I love teaching people how to be their own doctors. I have a little eggplant now and then. I have a little potato most days. My husband has 5 times the potatoes I have. I don't know what your body will tell you, but if you have arthritis or gout, an inflammatory condition, my suggestion is stop the nightshades. One lady said, but I love the nightshades. I said, how much do you love your arthritis? It's not forever. Did you hear that? It's not forever. It is just until you conquer it. And I have seen many conquer their arthritis. Even in the 70s, I've seen the swollen joints go back to normal. Did you hear that? As a nurse, I would never have thought that possible. Almonds, often called the king of all nuts, and they deserve the title because almonds are high in iron, high in calcium, high in protein, and they are an alkaline nut. Brazil nuts contain a very important mineral called selenium. You only need 5 Brazil nuts a day to get all the selenium you need for a day. If you've got mercury fillings in your mouth, it will be gobbling up all your selenium because mercury has an affinity for selenium. And if you don't have enough selenium, your thyroid can't work because your thyroid uses selenium to convert iodine into thyroxine. I hope I didn't lose you. Just eat your 5 Brazil nuts a day. And the most alkaline grain is millet. What's millet? Birdseed. What do the birds do? Spit out the hull and eat the kernel. Well, you can buy hulled millet, and it cooks up to a very nice porridge for breakfast, and it's gluten-free. Millet, quinoa, spelt quinoa, buckwheat. Buckwheat pancakes are pretty good. And amaranth.
Granny Smith apples and grapefruit, which have low sugar content and antifungal properties, are great alternatives for those looking to curb their sugar cravings. So what can you do to break this harmful cycle? Barbara O'Neill suggests eliminating all forms of processed sugar from your diet. Processed sugars, such as those found in sweets, soft drinks, and many packaged foods, are the main fuel for yeast and fungus in the body.
So to conquer diabetes, what do? To conquer diabetes, go for the low glycemic index foods. It's not easy. It's easy. I meant to say it's not hard to get a glycemic index. You can Google that. It's a matter of having berries for breakfast instead of banana. It's as simple as having a sweet potato instead of potato. Having your whole grains, eliminating the wheat. Low GI foods. Number 2, daily legumes. I met a man, he was a scientist, he was 69. He came to our retreat. He said, when I was 42, I was told I had pre-diabetes and to eat legumes every day. He said, I eat legumes every day and I never got diabetes. Because the beans give that lovely, sure, steady delivery of fuel. But how do we stop them causing bloating or wind? You soak them overnight. And then you rinse them very well. And then you bring them to the boil. Have you seen all the froth that comes on? You know what that is? Wind. You got to rinse it away. What I do is when my beans are 3/4 cooked, I rinse them again. And then I put my beans into a delicious sauce. And then you will not have that problem. They'll be a lot easier to digest. Number 3, there are some things that must stop. What must stop is wheat. What must stop is refined sugar. Now, if someone's looking at conquering diabetes, initially they also need to eliminate all your healthy sugars, like your palm sugar, your maple syrup and honey. So they need to be stopped until the pancreas is starting to recover. And it can recover. One young man named Dan did our program. He was type 1 diabetes. He got diabetes after a strong course of antibiotics at the age of 15. He's now 19. He said, my specialist said my pancreas is dead. I said, is it gangrene? What's dead? I said, if there is blood going through your pancreas, it's not dead. The life of the flesh is in the blood.
By cutting off this sugar supply, you essentially starve these harmful microorganisms, preventing them from multiplying and causing further damage. Instead of processed sugar, Barbara O'Neill recommends incorporating more alkaline-forming foods into your meals. These foods, like vegetables, whole grains, and leafy greens, help balance the body's pH levels and create an environment that discourages the growth of harmful organisms. Alkaline foods not only fight off yeast and fungus, but also support overall health, reducing inflammation and promoting better digestion. For those struggling to satisfy their sweet tooth, Barbara O'Neill suggests choosing natural sweeteners like Manuka honey. Unlike processed sugars, Manuka honey has antifungal and antibacterial properties, making it a much healthier alternative. Manuka honey can actually help inhibit the growth of yeast, while still providing a naturally sweet flavor that won't disrupt your body's balance. She also encourages consuming fruits with natural sugars in moderation. While fruit contains sugar, it's paired with fiber, vitamins, and minerals that help the body process it more effectively. Fruits like Granny Smith apples and grapefruit are particularly beneficial because they are lower in sugar and have antifungal properties, making them excellent choices for those looking to reduce sugar intake without sacrificing taste. Incorporating these natural sweeteners and low-sugar fruits into your diet can satisfy your cravings without feeding the harmful yeast and fungus in your body. By making these smart substitutions, you're not only taking control of your sugar consumption, but also supporting your body's ability to fight infections and restore balance.